2006 Toyota Matrix 1Z ZFE engine starter replacement. Check the pinned comment or the description for the timestamps. Diagnostics is next. If you're stuck and trying to get home, skip to about the 1:30 mark to see how to bang on the starter. The in-engine starter testing begins at about the 6:25 mark. The starter removal and replacement begins at about the 19-minute mark. The on-bench starter testing begins at about the 33:30 mark. Got an intermittent no start, no crank issue. You see that security light there flashing? I'm going to put the key in the ignition on the other side, and the light should go off. If the light continues to flash when your key is in the ignition, then try another key, because your problem might just be as simple as your key. So keys in, clutch is in. This is a manual transmission, and that's what we get. Now I can actually hear with the windows up in a quiet environment, I can actually hear the fuel pump running. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it, but here we go. So sounds like we're getting some type of action. I'm going to hold the camera a little closer to this back seat here because the fuel pump's under there, and you might be able to hear what I'm talking about. I'll be real quiet. Here we go. I don't know if you heard that. I'll try it again. So it sounds like the fuel pump is running. Let's say you're in a parking lot, or like me in the fuel aisle at the gas station. You know your battery's good because you've been driving around all day. It's just all of a sudden it won't start. Pop the hood and look down in here, and this here is the starter solenoid, and I'll slip the camera under and you can see the starter motor as well. Let's see. There's the starter motor there, and that looks like that is the original starter on this Matrix. Almost 220,000 miles, so not a big surprise that it's going out. But what you can do is smack on either this solenoid, you can see the marks there that I made from smacking on it, or the starter motor, depending on which one's your problem, and that might get you one more start to get you home. So there's the starter solenoid there, and again, right behind there, the larger cylindrical thing, that's the starter motor itself. Sometimes the starter motor can get a little bound up, and you smack it and the brushes will free. Sometimes it's the solenoid, the plunger in the solenoid. So if you got something like a little hammer, I know a lot of people wouldn't be carrying a little hammer with them, but even like the what would probably work well is from the spare tire kit, the tool for the tire iron tool, or the 21mm wrench that they give you, or even the handle for the jack, something that you can reach in here and just smack this a little bit. So I smacked on this solenoid, and in my case it was the solenoid because after smacking it a few times it did start. If that didn't work, then I'd move under here and smack the starter a couple times. And if you have somebody in the vehicle turning the key at the same time that you're smacking this, you have a greater likelihood of success. But even solo, sometimes this will work, sometimes it won't. So in my case, because this is what got it to start, it's almost positive to be the starter solenoid that's my problem. But we will step through a few more diagnostic things just so you don't accidentally replace the starter and that it ends up being something else on the circuit. I'm pretty sure that it is the starter on here, but we're going to troubleshoot the whole circuit anyway. I want to mention this important tip when you're trying to diagnose this. If your lights don't black out, or you're trying to start it and it's not starting, then it's probably not your starter. Here's what I mean. I'll go ahead, I'll put the clutch in because this is a manual transmission, or if you're in an automatic, you want to make sure you're in either neutral or park. Now when I turn the key to start it, the lights, the dash lights up here should black out. Here we go. Blacked. Okay, she did start, and now they're back on, you see? If your lights are not blacking out, then as you saw in the beginning of the video, the fuel pump was running, we could hear it, the lights did black out, we could see it. That's a clue that it was attempting to start the starter. But watch what happens if I don't press in the clutch, or this would also be the same as being in like drive, being in a gear other than park or neutral in an automatic. I'll turn the key to the on position. I'll wait for the beeps to finish. Now when I turn the key and go to start it, You hear the clicking, but it's not blacking out. The clock is blacking out. Clock is blacking out, but the dash here is not. And you cannot hear the fuel pump. If you're getting this situation, then if you're in a manual transmission, I would try troubleshooting the clutch safety switch. Or if you're in an automatic, I would make sure that you're actually in park or neutral. Move the shifter around, and sometimes in the engine bay there's a park neutral safety switch. It's actually a lever. It's a lever on the transmission housing. Sometimes it can kind of get stuck not quite in park, and so you'll get this effect where you go to start it and it's not even blacking out the dash because it's not even sending power to the starter. So if you see this on your Matrix, Corolla, most Toyotas, this is not a starter issue. Something else is going on. So it's been real hit or miss. Sometimes she starts, sometimes she won't. Let's see if she'll start now. And she does. She just started for me to move her over to the garage, and now she won't, but that's good because we can use this for our diagnostics. Under the hood here, we'll go ahead and take this fan shroud out. That'll give a lot more room. It's very easy to do. All we got to do is disconnect one electrical right here and then pop the wire out of these little guides there and there. Then we have a 10mm here. Over on the other side, we've got one in about the same place, right there, right there, and then we can disconnect right up here. This hose will stay. You can disconnect it here or at the bottom. Shouldn't be any coolant that comes out of here if the vehicle's cool. If the vehicle's not cool, don't do this. Wait till it gets cool. And leave that just like that. The rest of this will come out with it. So next we'll go ahead and do that electrical there. There's the electrical here, and there's a little tab right here. I'm going to press that down and pull it back. Might be a little hard to press. You don't want to break anything. I'll show you here when I pull that off. I was pressing this down here, pressing that, and then pull it back. And I'll also have to undo this here, this little spot right here where it's sticking in. And then there's another one right back here. Just pull it out there. Okay. There's that electrical disconnected, and now we'll just come up over here and grab this 10mm fastener. Maybe I can get in here with this. There's that fastener. Now we will move over here to this side and do the same thing on that one right there. There's that fastener there. Now we can pull this fan shroud up. Electrical disconnected and those fasteners out. We'll be able to just pull up, and we're going to be pulling it out of these little guides down here, and then same deal over on the other side. So you just want to pull it up and then just kind of wiggle it to get it clear of any obstacles. Let's see what we can do here. Okay, so it's out of the guides. Now it's just a matter of getting it up and out, and that's all there is to it. So these guides here, and there, that's what we were pulling up on. For this first test here, we're going to check the ground. I just moved the camera over a little bit. This is the solenoid here, and starter motor's under there. This rubber cap, if you move this rubber cap back, that post right there is the B+ post. It's going to have battery power. Anytime the battery is connected, you just need to check for voltage. We should be getting battery voltage. I'll put that right there on that B++. Let's see if I can get that to focus a little better. And then you can hear on the starter body, you can see I've got that full battery voltage. If I go over here to the bell housing, you can see I also have that full battery voltage. So if you do this test and you can't illuminate the light, or you're not getting battery voltage across from the B post to the ground, then before you buy a new starter, you want to check all your grounds, because you should be able, if you've got the battery hooked up, you should be able to get battery voltage from this B+ post over to ground. So we can see that this is passing that test. I'll just cover this up for the moment here, and now we'll move to another electrical test, another one that's real easy. I'm going to disconnect the switch electrical for the starter, and I'm going to see if it's getting power when I turn the key. The switch for the starter is going to be this electrical here. I've got the camera way down in there by that front engine mount, so you're not going to be able to see this well when you're doing it, but I'll try to use I'm going to press in right here, and this probably hasn't been disconnected in a long time, so you're going to kind of press that in and try to pull it back, wiggle it out. There it goes. Alright, that's what we're looking for there. Now this next test, you just need a multimeter or a test light to do it. I'm going to use a multimeter just because my multimeter leads are longer than my test light leads. We just need something to get in there. I'm just going to use this wire here. You see, I just stripped the wire and looped it so it's a little bit, might fit a little more snugly. Don't want to break anything when you're putting something in here, but you do want to have a good enough connection that you're going to get a good read. So I'm just going to snug that in there. Could use like a little spade too. Alright, so that's in there. The other end of that wire, in my case, I just put an alligator clamp on that too. And I'm going to go ahead and just clamp this onto the lead here for the meter. And now for our black, what we'll do is over here on the battery, you can see right here. So just hook an alligator clip up or whatever to the negative terminal on your battery, and then the other end of that, get that to the lead on your multimeter. And then back on your multimeter, grab this real quick, we will go to DC voltage. So in that case, that's the setting there on this meter. Voltage DC, and we'll go to 20 volts max. And I'll move this meter up here by the window so that when I'm sitting in the seat, I can see the reading on it. Key is in the ignition. I got the meter up here on the dash. Let me get that to focus for you. We'll go ahead and try to start her and see if we get voltage here. Alright, clutch in. And you see we got voltage. And I can still hear that fuel pump running. So we are getting power through the circuit. This, in my case, confirms that my problem is the starter. It's either the starter solenoid or the motor itself. I'm just replacing the whole thing since I can get a reman Toyota starter for $100 in my area. If you do this test and you do not see voltage there on your meter, then I wouldn't buy a new starter just yet. I would work backwards on the circuit, because you have to make sure you're getting power to the starter solenoid in the first place. Again, if you're doing this test and you're not getting power up here on your meter, then slow your roll on replacing the starter and double check that circuit. Now, one last test that I'm going to do that you may choose to do or not to do is I'm actually going to back probe this. I know that a lot of people don't like to back probe, but I'm going to do this anyway. So I'm just going to take this little pin here and I'm going to slide this back. And the reason I'm doing this is I want to be able to hook the circuit back together completely, because I want to be absolutely certain. The reason is because this is my daily driver and I want her to be reliable. I don't want to misdiagnose a circuit issue. Okay, so I've got that in there like so, and I'm just going to take a multimeter and check for continuity to make sure that I am actually, this probe here is actually touching the contact. So I've got my multimeter set on continuity. If this is touching where it should be, you'll hear a beep, Beep. Alright, so now what I can do is I can go ahead and plug this back in. I'm going to plug this back in. Snap. And now I've got the circuit. Oops. Let's see if I can see that pin there. You see the pin there? Now I have a way of checking whether I'm getting voltage with the circuit closed. The other way you can check to make sure that this your back probe actually is part of the circuit is if you put your multimeter on continuity or just on the lowest resistance setting, and if you have continuity across here, see I'm just going over here onto ground, then you know your back probe is in there correctly. You can either again use it. This meter has a buzzer that goes off when it's a complete circuit, or you can just put on your lowest resistance setting and then you'd want to see 0 or an extremely low resistance value. So now what I'm going to do with the circuit all the way back together is I'm just going to be measuring voltage in parallel. So just going to hook it up the exact same way as before, except I'm going to be on that instead of there, and then this will actually be all hooked up together. This isn't necessary. It's fairly definitive, the test that we just did, but I want to be absolutely sure, and it would be really great if we get another no start. There I am there on that pin back probing, and you can see I've got the multimeter set up the same way. The red I just have going to the red, and then over here as well I'm also in 20 volts DC. Over here I'm just connected up to a alligator clip right here to the negative side of the battery. I'll put this up on the windshield and then I'll try to start her. Alright, I'm back inside and I'll try to start her. And you see we are getting voltage. There's a bit of a voltage drop because it is trying to activate that solenoid, but it's not happening. So in my case this serves as an extra confirmation. I'm going to go smack on the solenoid and see if we can get it to start. So now we got all this room. I'm going to go ahead and smack on this thing. See if I can get it to start one more time. And I will go ahead and just hook back in here because I would like to see what kind of voltage drop occurs if I can get her to start one more time. Let's see what happens. Maybe she'll start after all that banging. Nope. So I'm going to reach under, I'm going to bang on the motor this time. Let's see. A few more whacks here on the solenoid. Now let's try it. Back inside, let's see what we got. Ah, look at that. Yeah, so it's either the solenoid or the motor. You can see once the engine started, you're not getting any voltage there. That's normal. I'll go ahead and cut it off. So we got one last start from her. Let's see if she'll start again. And she starts again. Alright. So that's just a demonstration there that banging on the starter sometimes can get you home. We'll go ahead and replace this starter, and you can see that was a normal voltage drop there compared to what we were seeing when it wasn't starting. So this is definitive. I need a new starter. Alright, so I'll go ahead and take this apart and we will get going with this starter replacement. First thing we'll do is disconnect the battery. We'll disconnect the negative terminal on the battery. If you have your original Toyota terminals, this will be a 10 millimeter. As you can see, this is not the original Toyota terminal, so I'm using a 12 millimeter. We just want to take this off, get the battery disconnected. Okay, I'm also going to cover this up. I got this covered up. If you don't have a cover, just make sure that this isn't going to accidentally come back over here. Now we'll move back over to the starter. If you did not yet remove the fan shroud, I'll put up a timestamp and just go back to that part of the video. It's real easy. We already did that for diagnostics, so we'll go ahead and get started on the starter motor. There's just 2 bolts, that one right there, and then on this side, going the opposite way, that one right there. And then we just have the two electrical. If you're doing the diagnosis, you've probably already disconnected this one, and then we disconnect this. So now that the battery is disconnected, let's go ahead and peel this back. And that is a 12mm. We'll go ahead and grab this 12mm right here. It shouldn't be too tight. Let's pull this nut off. And this is the B+ post. So there's just going to be a wire that we'll pull off after we get the nut off here. There is the nut, and then this wire will pop off just like that. Okay, so that's out of our way. Now this electrical, I just moved the camera, and I'll put up a timestamp for a better view earlier in the video when I disconnected this the first time. You've already got this disconnected if you went through the diagnostic scene earlier. You're just going to press on this part on the bottom right there. It is really hard and it hurts your finger, but press it down. See how that's moving there? And then just kind of wiggle it back. So those are the two electrical connections. Now we just have those two bolts. We can actually see both of those bolts at the same time. There's the one right there, and the other one is right here. And those are both 14mm. Not a whole lot of room down here. I'm going to break each one free before drawing either one out all the way. There we go. Okay. Now we'll come up here. Might need a deep socket for that. Let's see if I can get in here with this flex head. Yeah, that looks like that'll do it. Okay. Alright. I'll go ahead and bring these out. You can see it's already turning by hand there. Might have to put another couple turns on this one. Let's see. Oops. Yep, that'll turn now. Now you can just kind of wiggle it. It's already free. Each of these bolts is pretty long. There's that top one. Now I'm just going to keep holding on to the starter with one hand and draw the other one out. And there's that bottom one. Okay, now we'll see that we can just pull this right out just like that. And there's our starter. With the starter out, you can see right in there to the flywheel, which is always pretty cool. Here's the starter that we just removed. This is dirty over here because it's got some clutch material since it's a manual. This looks like the original starter, and there's the Toyota number 28100-0D080, and that is a Denso starter. And you'll notice that the remanufactured starter is the same part number, but it just ends in 84. So let's see if I can get this to focus with the glare. There it is, same part number, but it ends with 84. It says remanufactured for Toyota, and that is a Denso. So it's a Denso. They use Denso cores, and they remount them with Denso parts. So it's a quality starter. I actually think it's a pretty good deal to be able to get this starter for $100 from Toyota. So I'll show you my receipt here. There is a core, and so I'll explain what that means. There's the part number there. It was $99.60 at my local Toyota, which is Stevenson's West. And there's a core deposit of $60. What that means is that you pay this much, you pay $160 after tax, $167. But when I bring them back this core, I get that $60 back. So it ends up being a little bit over $100 after tax. And they did give me a new nut there, so that's great. And when you do any kind of cores with Toyota, you have got to save the box. So save your box. Make sure it's got the right part number on it. Right there. Right. Save your box because you got to put your core back in the box and return it, and that's how you get your $60 back or whatever the core is. I know everybody's in a different situation. You got to pick how you spend your money, but If you can get a Denso remanufactured starter for $100, that is a deal any day of the week. So now we're going to go ahead and put this back in. Alright, we're just going to wiggle this starter back in. And if you remember, we had, after we get it down here, so I'm just going to kind of bring it back in. Don't drop it and accidentally punch a hole in your... You remember kind of how the solenoid placement was and how those, let's see how those bolts kind of lined up. There's this one right down here and then the other one above. So I'm just going to pull this back, get this tucked in behind here. There we go. And slide that right in there. And let's see. Get that out of my way. And there we go. Okay, so now I'll grab that bottom bolt, and the bottom bolt is the one that went in from this way. I'm just going to get them both started by hand before I tighten in either one of them. Make sure it's aligned in there okay. Okay, so that's catching the threads. I'll grab the top bolt right here. And that one went around. Might have to move the camera right here. There it goes. Got that one almost all the way in by hand. Now come back to the bottom one. Get this all the way in by hand. And then we'll tighten them up. Torque on these is 27 foot-pounds. Not crazy tight. If you don't have a torque wrench or you can't get one in there, it's tight, but it's not crazy tight. So I got both those in hand tight. And now I'll go ahead and just tighten them up a little bit with the ratchet before I get the torque wrench in there. Just do a little. I'm gonna go to the other one, do a little bit back and forth. Pretty easy repair. Great way to save some money. If you want to get a torque wrench on those, looks like you're going to have to go in with extensions. Let's see what I can do here, kind of sneaking around some stuff. Over closer on this side. Let's see if it's even possible. Alright, yeah, you can sneak around with an extension. You got to sneak around a bracket like that. I'm using a wobble, but it's still pretty much in line of action. So go ahead and tighten this. There it is. So if you want to get a torque wrench on that bottom one, as you can see, you can just go in through the bottom like that. This plastic thing right there where the torque wrench is hitting, you can also move that out of your way. With those two mounting bolts in, now we just got the post and that one connector. So I'll just take this nut off here, and then you want to grab this. You want to grab this here, and you want to have a look at, we'll pull this back. There we go. You want to have a look at this, and you want this to be cleaned up. So I'm actually just going to sand this with a little bit of sandpaper. Make sure that there's a nice good connection there. And then when that goes on, it's just going to connect around the corner like that. So let me clean this up. Okay, it's nice and clean. Now slip this back on here. Get that nut on. Torque on this is going to be just 84 inch-pounds. If you want to use a torque wrench, it's 84 inch-pounds. If you don't want to use a torque wrench, that's just not crazy tight. There it is there. Okay. And now we'll grab, we'll put this rubber cap over there, just like that. And now the electrical, this electrical just snaps in. And the snappy part right there kind of faces down, so it's going to be like that. Only fits one way, but you can't really see it. So see how that snap was on the bottom? That's how it goes. Oops. Get in there until it snaps. Snap, and give a little tug. Back over here at the battery, we'll reconnect the negative terminal on the battery. Again, this will be a 10mm if you have your original Toyota terminals. This is a good chance too to just get this cleaned up, make sure that it's not corroded any. And we want to get this on here nice and snug. Make sure this battery is not moving around either. If it is, tighten this down. Use a 10mm deep socket. And this fastener here, tighten that down. So I got the battery hooked up. Before I put that fan and fan shroud back in, I'm just going to go ahead and start it. Make sure she starts. So we'll go ahead and put the fan back in now. I'm going to clean up the coolant that spilled and get my lights out of here. And when we slide the shroud part in here, it's going to line up with this on this side, and then the same deal over on this side. It's going to line up right there. So just keep that in mind as you watch me slide that in. Alright, so just as it was before, we're going to drop this into those guides. Just kind of got to get around whatever obstacles are in the way. And just want to look in and kind of align it. It's almost on this side. And on that side. Let's see. Alright, and there it is. Okay, when you've got it in the right place, those fasteners will not align. I'll show you what I mean. You'll see that this will be aligned down there when you've got it properly aligned, and then right here your fastener will line up right there, and also the same deal on the other side. See if I get the light down there. See how that's aligned, and the fastener is aligned. So we can put those 10mm fasteners back in now. Those two 10mm fasteners are in. There's the one and the other one over here. And now we can just reconnect this hose here for the coolant. Make sure that's pushed in. And lastly, extremely important, do not forget to reconnect the fan. You don't want to overheat. So just grab your electrical and line it up, push it until it clicks. Click, snap. Make sure you shake it. It's a very important connection. And then we'll just push these little deals right back in there, there, and there. I might need to move the camera. There it goes. And that's it. Fan shroud and fan is back in. Make sure the electrical is plugged in for the fan. That's extremely important. You don't want to overheat. Make sure your fan is plugged in. We'll go ahead and start her again. So that is it on the starter replacement. The last part of this video, I'm just going to step through the Toyota FSM starter bench testing procedure here for the solenoid and the motor. So to test this starter, we'll just follow the Toyota FSM. You can see I've got those labeled. 30, that's where that B plus post was. 50, that's the ignition switch. And then C is this one here. And that's the connection between the solenoid and the motor. We're going to just test the solenoid first, so we'll go ahead and remove this. Now, I already loosened this. We just want to take this nut off and then slip the wire off. Probably need a screwdriver for that. There, that is loose there, and I'm just going to tape it to the side so that it doesn't accidentally come up and touch this while we're testing it, because then that'll energize the motor. We don't want to test that just yet. You can put this nut back on here too. You want to make sure that you're getting this contact together whenever you put your test lead on there, so you don't get a bad reading. So if you're, depending on what kind of leads you're using, you might need this tightened down like so, and then put your alligator clamp there. I'll show you real quick what's going on inside here with the plunger. We won't be able to see a whole lot because of the way these solenoids are. You can buy just this solenoid a la carte. I'll put up a part number for that. They're like 60, 70 bucks though, so in my case I just bought the whole starter. These are JIS number 3s. You might be able to use a Phillips number 3, but be careful because they're real tight and you might strip it. I'm going to use an impact driver here to remove these with the JIS 3-bit, and we'll have a little look in there. Okay, so we get these out. And now this is going to want to push back because there's a spring. I can pull this back like that. And there's that spring. The spring will come out. And I'll just put this to the side. You can see that the way that they put this together here, if you want to get inside here and try to rebuild the contacts or clean them up, and I would think probably the best idea would be to heat this up, kind of peel it back and then pull it apart. I've never done that, but maybe someone would like to try that. But I will show you with this out. You can see here, this is what comes back and forth to move that plunger. This would be the plunger to move the. Let me push this to move the pinion. Here we go. I can't quite get my finger in there. I'll just put this back in. I'm just going to latch it on there real quick. Can't quite reach my finger in. They call it pull out and pull in because pull in pushes that pinion out and pull out brings it in. See that? So I put the spring back in here. You'll see that what we're testing is, one, whether this spring is actually going to work properly. But when this is electrified, this coil on the outside will cause this to pull in, and that, like you just saw, will push the pinion out. Then when there's no electricity there, it should allow it to release. They can fail different ways for different reasons. In my case, this is not pulling in, so something's probably going on in here with the contacts. Might be worn. I do want to mention though, with this here, if you aren't convinced that you need a new starter, always make sure that you do have a good connection here. All right. Make sure that you do have a good connection here and clean up. If this is real rusty, clean stuff up. A lot of times on starters, you can just clean up the contacts and that'll get you a little bit more life. It's not the case in this starter, but it is worth at least checking out. So to get this back together, I'm just gonna hook this plunger. Back on here, like that. And I got the spring, I'll put that spring back on here. And then line up the screw holes there, the bolt holes. Let's see, it's hopefully pretty close. Get these fasteners in. You want to tack these down pretty tight, very tight in fact. So all we'll need is jumper cables, just because they're nice and thick, and then a couple of little jumper wires here. And you can see I've got that labeled there just as shown before. And so what we're going to do now, we're going to take, I'll just use, the colors don't actually matter, but just because it's easier to follow. On this 50, which is the spade for the solenoid, we're going to put one side on here. The other side I'm just going to put over here to that positive on the battery. Make sure I have a good connection there. Okay, now, and then anytime you want to test your connections, obviously what you can do is, like with a test light or a multimeter, if you want to make sure that you're on there. Remember, as we saw earlier in the video, that should illuminate that light like that. So we know we have a good connection there. That's just to eliminate the possibility of seeing a null result on one of these tests, and then it actually ends up being from our connection and not from the starter test itself. Next, I'm going to take this black one and put it right on here. That's that post. That's that post there. That C post, okay? Make sure I'm keeping up with the focusing on this camera. The other side of this, I'm going to leave loose for the moment. I'm going to turn this so you can see. Now when I turn it like this, you have to make sure you're not going to, that's why I tape that. You want to make sure you're not going to accidentally reconnect that thick wire over to the one we just connected to. We're going to be watching this here. The other side of this, on the jumper cable, I'm just going to clamp on to the get a good clamp on there to the body on the starter. I'm going to clamp here. We want to do this next step fairly quickly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to clamp onto the battery terminal there, and then I'm going to touch this to that, and we're going to want to see the pinion pop out. So here we go. This might spark when you do this. Ready? Nothing. And that's what it was doing in the vehicle. So I bet if I bang on that starter, we'll be able to get this to work again. So let's double check though that I'm not off on any of my connections. I'll check this. Okay, that's a good connection. And on here, you can see we got a connection there. Now let's try it again. See if it pops out. Nope. Now in my case, this is what it was doing in the vehicle, but again, you want to make sure that you're not misdiagnosing a connection that you have that might not be hooked up all the way as a failure of the starter. If we do this, if we just connect the test light here onto the negative side of the terminal, as you remember earlier in the video, we should be able to ground through there, and you can see that light is on. That is telling us that this connection is good. Obviously nothing's going to happen if I touch here, because this is where our problem lies. So I'll just keep banging on it until I can get something going on there. So let's see if we can get that light, that to illuminate. There we go. See that? Now we can hook this up. Turn the starter so you'll be able to see that pinion there. And I'm just going to reach back in here onto this lead to make sure it is illuminating that light. So this should work. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to ground out on the body like this. Make sure you got a good ground there. And then very quickly what I'm going to do is just pretend this is connected to that. I'm going to close this like this. Nothing should happen, although it might spark a little. When I touch this to this, the pinion should come out. Pinion should come out. When I release it, the pinion should stay out. And then when I break the ground, either here or here, then the pinion should go in. That's what the test is going to look like. So here we go. Might get a little spark. All right, nothing happened, that's good. Pinion out, that's good. Release this, pinion stays out, that's good. Break the ground, pinion goes back in. That's the test that we're looking for. You want to be able to consistently get that result, not after banging on the solenoid for 15 minutes like I have been doing. So we'll just do it one more time. I'll just connect this here because I prefer to have this grounded on here first. Let's see, maybe it'll let us do it again, maybe it won't. So again, we'll connect. Nothing should happen. Touch here, pinion should come out. Release, pinion should stay out. Break the ground, pinion should go back in. Good, good, good. That's the correct test there. I'm going to do the test one more time quickly, because if you have a good starter, you want to do this test quickly. You don't want to burn out the coil. You want to do it within about 3 to 5 seconds, as mentioned in the FSM. So here's what you're going to do. Get your connection, and then be ready that once you close this, you want to get all these steps done in less than 5 seconds or so. So we're going to connect, nothing happens. We're going to touch, the pinion's going to come out. We're going to release, the pinion's going to stay out. We're going to break the ground, the pinion's going to go back in. Here we go. That's a good result. That's a good result. That's a good result. That's a good result. So again, maybe I'll be able to get one more out of here since it's super finicky and I haven't moved it. And I'll just narrate it this time. Nothing is good. Goes out, stays out, retracts. That's what you're looking for. And if you're wondering if we could just get the motor to run, we can. We can just throw power here, ground out on the body, and that'll get the motor to run. Definitely want to use cables. So we'll just go, let me put this in a way. I'm just going to clamp onto here. We'll just put right here. Make sure I got a good connection on that, and then I'm not, you don't want to short out to the body, so you got to do this just right. I'll go like this so we can see the motor. That looks pretty good. Okay, that's good. Other side's gonna go here. And then I will ground out. Let's see, ground out on the body here. And then when I close this, just the motor will run. Here we go. See that? Probably hear it better. We're not hooked up to the solenoid, so the pinion's not going to move out. But that is just checking the motor. And then, if you're curious, since this motor is good, if you're curious about what resistance looks across there, let's look at that real quick. Because that might be helpful for someone. Okay, got the meter there. I'm just going to go to 200 ohms because I would expect that resistance to be real low. And then I'm just going to just go right here. And on the other side, just to the ground. Let me get it better. Get on there better. There we go. Yeah, look at that. Really low resistance, basically a 1/4 ohm maybe even less right there. That's what we would expect. So I'm going to put this back on here and get that nut on there. Let me find that nut. There's that nut back on there, so that means that the motor is now connected to the power supply at the solenoid. So we're going to hook this back up the exact same way that it would be if it was in the vehicle. Remember, this was our B+ post, so that's just going to the positive side of the battery, and this was our switch, which was also positive on the battery, but it was only getting power if the circuit was working correctly when we would turn the key, right? So we're going to hook this up that exact same way. Go in here on this blade for the switch. Get that on there, and then the other side of this will be our ignition switch. So after we have the whole circuit hooked up, when we connect it to our positive, that'll be what activates it. Let me make sure that that's on there really well. It feels a little bit loose. Okay, so that's going to be on there like that. I want to put this in a position where you can see. Just maybe like that. All right. I'm going to use cables. So this cable I'm going to put on that B+ post. That's this one up here, that 30. Make sure I'm on there really well. I might just go like that. That feels pretty good. Now I'll be able to turn this so you can see that. Let's see if we can get that to focus. Okay. Then I will ground out on the body here. All right. This is again going to be our switch. The other side of the cable, I'll put the red side of the cable onto the red on the battery. And then this will be our ground, okay? Now, when I energize this circuit, it'll be by connecting, let me see, you can see, this is our ignition switch right here. So when I touch the ignition switch to the power supply, positive power supply, the pinion should move out and it should spin, just like it was trying to start the vehicle. So let's see. See that? So that's what's going on in the vehicle when you're actually turning the key, assuming that everything's going well on the circuit. As you can see, that is the normal result there. If you have a meter that can take 90 amps, then go ahead and throw a meter in series on this, and you're looking for 90 amps or less at 11.5 volts. So if you're troubleshooting a little deeper into your starter motor, that might help you there. So I got the starter facing up, so it's a little easier to see there. What we're going to do is we're just going to look for continuity on different combinations. We want this to be isolated. This is our B+ post. We want this to be isolated. The only time that this isn't going to be isolated is after the switch has been activated by the ignition, and then when that plunger moves up due to the magnetic field from the coil, that will connect this B+ to this C, and that C is got that ground strap on it for power to the motor. First thing, this is the switch, or 50 is what it's also called. We want to check for continuity between 50 and C. So that's good. We also want to check for continuity between 50 and the body. Oops, let me get a better grip on there. So that's good. Then we want to check for continuity between the body and C. That is good. So that's as we're expected to see. And when we pulled this starter out, it was starting, so it might be in just that spot where it'll work. Now we want to see no continuity, so we want it to be open between this terminal 30 and all of what we just did. So terminal 30, open, that's good. Open, that's good. And to the body, open, that's good. So that's a quick test. If you did not get continuity between your switch and C, or between either of them in the ground, then you probably got some type of internal fault on the solenoid, and you can call it at this point to replace the solenoid. So just to reiterate on that for the visual learners, I'm just going to use the test light now. So I'll clamp on here, I'll clamp on there to that ground, and obviously we'll get illumination here because we're just coming around like that, and we'll get it on 30 if I can get it in there right. I'll get it in there right on 30. There we go. But we won't get it on C. We won't get it on our switch, and we won't get it on the body as the ground. No voltage difference there, obviously, because again, this 30 is isolated. So this is the setup of it in the vehicle until you turn the ignition switch on. And so that is a wrap. I hope this video was helpful for you on your Matrix or Corolla starter issues. Thank you for watching, and good luck with your repair.